back to Cityline. With me, I have an individual that I am so excited to talk to. My little heart's palpitating because she holds a position that is so amazing in Tacoma. I'm talking about our 2021 to 2023 brand spanking new Tacoma Poet Laureate, Lydia K. Valentine.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
It is so great to have you here, my dear. Okay, so let's just get down because we only have 13 minutes and I have a ton of questions. What inspired you, Lydia, to apply for this appointment?
First off, I love poetry. Have always loved it, and I love living in Tacoma. So to be able to represent Tacoma and to be able to focus on poetry and literary arts in the city has been a goal of mine since I first applied. This was actually my third time applying for the position, and I almost didn't. But people kept saying, "Do it. You have to." Once I got the fourth email from someone saying, "Please apply again," I went for it, and I'm so glad that I did.
Oh, I loved that you were transparent and showed us that because, I mean, it's kind of like writing poems, please let me just write one good sentence. And if you can't, it gets tossed, thrown in the garbage, but then you go back and try again. And
Right.
yeah, that spirit I know is going to show up in your time as poet laureate of
Oh,
never
thank you.
giving up. So, give me a background in terms of your background and how it ties into the poet laureate position.
Right. So I have lived here. My family and I moved here in 2004. We had done a lot of research on where we wanted to relocate as a family, and Tacoma was at the top of the list. It's very similar to the Pittsburgh area, which is where I grew up, and we packed up the kids and the cats and my two sisters, and we all migrated out here and have loved it ever since. Right now, Tacoma is in the middle of somewhat of a boom because a lot of people are moving here from after being outpriced in Seattle and California. And it gives me a moment's pause when people say, "Oh yeah, Tacoma is on the come up," and I'm like, I moved here for a reason, on purpose. I moved here to live in the city of Tacoma, and I'm so glad to be here. It's very comfortable. It's a city, it's a big city, but it has a small town feel, and the people are very close and loyal, and that reminds me of home as well.
I love that. I mean, that is such a beautiful tapestry of how you started, and to hear that Tacoma was number one on your list makes this Tacoma girl very, very proud. Because Tacoma, there's a reason why Mary Woodards calls us compassionate Tacoma, because we are. You also are poet laureate during a very tumultuous time right now in our nation and in our city. And you have your first poetry collection called Brief Black Candles. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Brief Black Candles, it really encapsulates my experience as a Black woman, as a Black mother, as a queer woman in this country. When the poem that gives the title to the collection really is about the brief Black lives that have been cut short due to excessive force, police violence in our country. And that is a lot of, I won't say it, a lot of the collection, but just a lot of the heart pain that comes from a collective grief that Black people in our country have been going through with losing these people. It's almost every time you turn on the TV or go on social media, there is another loss. There's been another Black life taken from us. And I feel like we as a people, in a way, we are untethered from our roots because our roots were stolen from us, our native land, our native language. Um, and so we have formulated a connection to one another throughout the country, and we feel this loss collectively. And for me, when I am experiencing things that I want to figure out or that are giving me a lot of anguish, I write about it. I have to get it out and on paper. And so the other side to the collection, I'm an adult orphan. We lost our dad in 2001. He passed away. And our mother, who used to winter out here in Tacoma, she loved Tacoma as well. We actually had her service out here. Tacoma really is our home. But she passed away after 2 years of cancer treatment out here. We moved her out here once she was diagnosed. And so the collection also has to do with grief and loss, personal grief and loss, as a daughter who's lost both of her parents, and my aunt, who was very much like a mother figure to me.
Your words sit where I live. There's a couple of identifications that I share with you in terms of what you just said. I also share with you a love of theater. You're fairly involved in Tacoma's theater scene as well. Tell us about that. Tell us what you do in theater and how we can see you.
Absolutely. I'm more in the background. I have stage fright like you wouldn't believe. My sister, she is an actor. She just won Broadway World's Performer of the Decade for the Seattle area, which they always say Seattle, even though we're in Tacoma. But I am something that is called a dramaturg primarily. I am also a playwright and director, an assistant director. And I've done a lot of work with Toy Boat Theater Company and in Pathos Theater. I'm the resident dramaturg for both of those companies here in Tacoma. And what a dramaturg is, it brings together my love of theater and my love of research. I'm very much a researcher. I love knowing all of the information. And in 2016, when I took the year off to concentrate on being a mom and a graduate student, I also missed teaching. And one of the things that I had done every year as a teacher to that point was take a class to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So I had to teach a new Shakespearean play every year, whichever one we were going to see. And unpacking the language and making connections to that time period and modern time periods was fascinating. And that's about what a dramaturg does for works that have already been established, is giving the actors and the directors the context of everything. I also work with people who are developing new plays, and I've done that work with Toy Boat a little bit, but definitely with Porkfield Productions, which is out of Seattle, an Asian-focused theater company, and worked with people to let them know how their words are coming across, what an audience might not understand, and to help them to make their plays a little stronger. I've done that with African American Writers Association in Seattle. We had a whole series of playwriting workshops that I did and dramaturgy on their short playwriting festival that we had last year as part of the We Out Here festival in Seattle. And it was very different because we had to be online during this pandemic. I love that it didn't stop things, but it did alter and change the way that we are able to interact with people. And I'm looking forward to doing that as Poet Laureate, to continue to reach people virtually that may not be able to leave their homes or may not be able to get to a certain venue, but we can still connect digitally.
Speaking of that, in terms of virtual, how does that change your creative process, or how does it Does it sharpen your creative process?
That's a great question. I think in a way it does sharpen it because I have, we live in a culture of busy, right? We're so busy. We're always doing different things and no time to catch up with certain people. But when everything shut down, we started to look to different ways to connect with people and people we haven't been able to connect with because they're too far away. The time zone is different. And so I have been able to write with a lot of different groups of people, just creatives who I know in my life who are also poets and writers. And we just set aside time to get together. Someone will throw out a prompt and we'll write for a while. And some of my best work, I would say actually all of my best work comes when I am writing in coordination with other creative people around me. So I've been really lucky.
Makes sense. Somehow, whenever my thing is to cook, so whenever I cook something for the first time for people who love food, that synergy, it always turns out great. Now watch out
Yes.
this. But I do think there's a symbiotic relationship where iron sharpens iron, so to say. So is there a particular poem of your own that has special meaning to you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Sometimes I feel like whatever is the most recent thing that I've written is the one that stands out the most. But there is a poem that it was the last poem that I read in the Pass the Torch event that Abby Murray planned and put together for me as the incoming poet laureate. And she was such an amazing poet laureate herself. Um, and it's called A Beggar's Lament. And about that poem, the thing about that poem is there's a saying that you've probably heard: if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. And my parents would say that, I've heard that. But that saying just kept playing in my head for months, actually, because I knew I wanted to write something um, with that as a theme or something, and I couldn't quite get it. And then A Beggar's Lament came to me. I have a really good friend, a beautiful poet from Olympia, Christine Robbins, and definitely look up her work. And her daughter, Wish, passed away 2 years ago um, after a struggle because Wish was just such a unique and vibrant and sensitive being in this world. And that poem speaks, I think, to a mother's pain and fear and of for her children when they're struggling, and that one stays with me. It's a fairly recent poem. It will be in a collection coming from Blue Cactus Press, which is a Tacoma-based press. They are putting out an anthology of voices of women of color, and that I'm lucky enough that piece will be in there.
Oh, I'm going to have to definitely get that collection because, again, you struck another chord in my heart when you talk about that mother feeling that you have, and that extends to that. I just recently finished watching Hemingway on PBS,
Hmm.
and I was struck with his life and his work. And it caused my wife to ask me who are my favorite poets. And the first poet that came out of my mouth was Pablo Neruda. So I
Hmm.
ask you, who are your favorite poets?
Wow, that's so hard. But Nikki Giovanni has been a favorite of mine since I was a student. And 2 years ago, she was speaking at UPS, University of Puget Sound, on my birthday, and I got to go and see her speak, and she signed a book, Happy Birthday, to me. And that's, I couldn't, nothing can pass that up just about, because she is a hero. I love her work. It's just so visceral and straightforward and lyrical as well. Um, I also love, I mean, we have some great poets here in Tacoma.
Yes.
Kelly Richards,
Yes.
who was the poet laureate to 2 cycles ago. And let's see, who else is a great favorite? Someone that I turn to, I mean, Jack Gilbert is a poet I do love, and I think because I came to him at a time when I was mourning the loss of my father, and he has a collection, The Great Fires, that focuses on Pittsburgh and also the loss of his wife. So both of those things were just so they really spoke to my heart because even though I'm from Aliquippa, not Pittsburgh, it's an offshoot and it's very similar to the city. It's our closest city, you know. So
I love that. You know, I had something on my bucket list that unfortunately I'm not going to be able to achieve, and that was to meet Maya Angelou and to have her write her name on my arm, and then I would have a tattoo written over it.
Wow. Yeah.
That didn't happen. I got to hear her speak in Seattle, and I treasure that. So
yes.
When you think about teaching, where do you teach, Lydia? And how can people be one of your prize students?
That's awesome. Well, a lot of people have probably missed their opportunity because most of my experience is in middle school. So but I taught for many years at Charles Wright Academy. I moved out here to teach there. Then I took time off to be a graduate student and mom, and I've been teaching at Seattle Girls School since I returned. I'm not in the classroom currently. I'm the learning specialist for Seattle Girls School, but I also teach at Northwest Indian College in their English and Humanities department. Although I did teach a very, very basic intro to computers class because yeah, I think all of my family was a smidge surprised, but I mean, I was definitely, they made sure I was qualified to teach it, and it was a great connecting class because I actually still have a lot of those students in my English classes.
Do you remember when I said at the top of the show, your ability to not give up is going to here? There it was, teaching a computer class. I love that. Lydia, before I have to say goodbye to you, until I see you again in 90 days, where can people read your work and what's coming up?
That's a great question. So there's the anthology from Blue Cactus Press. I'm not 100% sure on the name, but I think it is going to be We Need a Reckoning, which comes from a poem of mine that will be in the collection. So keep a lookout on their website. But I also have a website, literaryinc.com, and I have a wonderful social media assistant who has really graciously been working on my website and also my Instagram, Literary Inc., to keep information going so that people can know what's coming up, what's next, where I'll be speaking. And people can reach out. I love coming in and doing poetry workshops for classes and readings, of course, but really I love working with other people to develop their work and to see what we come up with in workshop settings as well.
Lydia, in these 13 minutes that I have had the pleasure of basking in your glow, I have learned that you don't give up. I have learned that you give voice to the voiceless sometimes, or those that are hurt and dismissed in our society, that you have a strong hold on the 400 years of racism in the BIPOC community, that we have a lot of work to do. And for that, I can't wait to have you on my show again. Lydia, thank you so very much for being here today.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it so much.
My pleasure, my dear. We have much more to come on Cityline, so don't go away. We'll be right back after this quick break.